The hillside! It's groaning! Something's wrong! It's gonna collapse!
Rain hammered the tin roofs when Musa Kamara heard the hillside groan. Outside his bicycle workshop, the slopes sounded alive, deep, wet, and angry, as if something huge had turned over in its sleep. Then a torch beam flashed across his wall and caught the red paint marks he had added after every storm, each one a warning no one wanted to read. And before he could call out, a child screamed, a bucket clattered, and somewhere above the settlement, mud began to move. Musa ran to the doorway and shouted, "Everybody follow the red line, now!" For half a heartbeat, his neighbors froze, shocked by the fear in his voice, and then the darkness swallowed them as he pointed uphill. 3 weeks earlier. Why did Musa trust the hill more than the people around him? And what was waiting beneath that red line? No one knew yet, but even then, the mountain was already stretching its jaw toward the houses below. By dawn, Musa was bent over a bicycle wheel, fingers black with grease, listening to the town wake beneath the hill. His workshop sat in a hillside settlement outside Freetown, Sierra Leone, where narrow paths twisted between crowded homes and the cheapest land climbed straight into danger. During rains, water rushed through drainage channels stuffed with plastic, tins, and old clothes, and then it vanished into the earth under people's doors. Above them, the slope loomed like a sleeping giant, still and patient, pretending not to breathe. Musa had learned not to trust that silence. So after every heavy storm, he walked to the edge of the settlement, crouched beside the same patch of soil, and marked each tiny crack with chalk. Then he measured how far the lines had crept overnight. Most neighbors laughed and called him a mechanic who worried too much. But one crack, almost invisible last week, had lengthened enough to catch the eye and to stop him cold. It split like a hairline thought, and Musa felt the hill breathe. And that breath pulled him backward into another rainy season, one he had never really escaped. Rain had been falling then too, and a smaller landslip had peeled away part of a neighbor's compound like wet skin. No one died, but the warning stayed with him long after the cleanup. Since that day, he believed disasters did not begin with collapse. They began when people ignored the first cracks. He looked at the slope the way a mechanic studies a bent wheel. One spoke fails and the whole ride wobbles. After each storm, he smelled wet clay before he saw damage, heard water running where no stream had ever flowed, and noticed the trees leaning a little farther downhill. When an older neighbor laughed and said, "The hill has always stood there," Musa only nodded and marked the crack again. Yet up the slope, men had started adding a new room to a house, digging into the same tired earth. Musa watched the fresh bricks rise beneath the rain clouds, and his stomach tightened. He knew a house could invite danger when it was built where the earth was already exhausted. Then the first drops returned, soft as whispers, and Musa lifted his face, certain the hill was trying to speak again, but the settlement had already turned away. So Musa decided that fear without a plan was only noise. Beside his shop, he bolted a sheet of corrugated metal to the wall and painted a simple evacuation map in 3 colors. Red marked the danger zone below the slope. Yellow traced the narrow escape lane between houses and broken drains. Green pointed to the rocky football field above the settlement, the only ground that felt steady underfoot. At dusk, he walked the route with a few neighbors, stopping at each turn to show where their feet should go if the hillside failed in the night. He told them to keep a small emergency bag ready, with water, a flashlight, medicine, and important papers, and to leave their shoes near the door. He told them to choose the meeting point before the rain grew worse. Auntie Benta, bent but brave, repeated every step until she could say it without looking. One man snorted that the map looked like playhouse drawings, but Musa felt the insult and painted the red line brighter, as if daring the mountain to cross it. And when torchlight glinted on the metal, it looked like a tiny candle in the rain. Meanwhile, the rainy season tightened its grip on the settlement. Days of rain softened the ground until every path turned slick and the drainage channels overflowed so badly that water began cutting new paths between the houses. The hillside changed in plain sight. A fresh crack lengthened across the slope like a wound opening under the skin. A tree root lifted from the soil, exposed and trembling, and where there had been dry earth before, a thin trickle of mud appeared, brown and shiny, slipping lower each hour. Rain drummed on tin roofs, low thunder rolled somewhere beyond the ridge, and beneath it all came a distant rumbling that seemed to rise from underground. Musa returned to the crack with his chalk and realized the line had widened enough to trigger his plan. He went from house to house again, more urgent now, but some neighbors were tired of the rain and tired of his warnings. One man said he would wait until morning. Another insisted on saving his belongings before leaving. Musa wanted to shout, but he knew panic could scatter people as easily as fear could freeze them. So he pointed to the slope, to the crack, to the water cutting fresh grooves through the dirt, and he said, "The hill is already moving." Then night fell, and the rain became violent. The slope no longer rumbled, it roared. First came a small slide, a spill of soil that broke loose under the houses. Then the main mass gave way, tearing downhill like the sound of the earth ripping its own skin. Mud, stones, and uprooted trees surged together in a dark wave. Musa did not freeze. He slammed a wrench against the metal door, blew his whistle until it shrieked, and shouted the route. Red line to yellow path, then up to green ground. Torchlights began bobbing through the darkness as neighbors ran, slipping, grabbing children, calling names. The painted arrows on the map flashed in the rain, red, yellow, green, the only colors that still made sense. And then Musa saw Auntie Binta standing still in the chaos, staring back toward her house. She had remembered her late husband's photo and the small bag of documents she had left behind. For one terrible second, she could not move. Musa turned and ran back for her, the mud already licking at his boots. "Now, Auntie!" he cried, taking her arm. The delay felt endless, like standing on the edge of a breaking bridge. Behind them, the last neighbors stumbled uphill as the lower houses vanished under the surge. One home disappeared whole, swallowed by brown water and broken wood. Musa's workshop buckled, its wall caving inward, half buried before his eyes. And then, suddenly, the roar stopped. In the raw silence, Musa stared at the survivors clustered on the green field and understood something that settled deeper than fear. The hill had won the ground, but the map had won the night. By dawn, the settlement looked smaller, as if the slope had taken a bite out of it. Brown mud covered the lanes, broken wood lay twisted between shattered walls, and bent metal glinted through the wreckage like exposed bones. Yet on the green field above the slope, the safe zone was full of survivors. Neighbors wrapped in blankets, coughing, counting, holding hands and calling the names of children who answered back. Dozens had made it out because there had been a route, a meeting point, and one man who refused to stop repeating both. Musa found his painted map near the workshop, soaked and torn, but still readable where the red line bled through the rain. By morning, rescue workers and community leaders had arrived, not to praise one hero, but to count people, find the missing, help the displaced, and clear the path for emergency access. Even the men who had laughed at the drawings stood beside him now, asking where they should go next time. Musa looked at the hill, then at their faces, and answered quietly, "Not next time. This time was the warning." And as the daylight touched the settlement, the red line was pinned upright like a public promise. Weeks later, the place began to change in ways the old Musa would have prayed for but never expected to see. People cleared drains before they filled, pulled rubbish from the channels, and marked no-build zones on the ground with sticks and stones. They spoke openly about moving away from the unstable slope before the next rainy season, and this time they spoke like planners, not survivors waiting for luck. A child repainted the red arrow on a new signpost, carefully filling the line until it shone again in the dusk. Musa stood nearby with his bicycle headlamp glowing in his palm like a small, stubborn candle against the dark. He watched neighbors meet, measure, and decide together, and he felt the hill's lessons settle into them at last. The slope had always been warning them, but only preparation had turned that warning into survival. They did not stop the rain, they learned to stop running from the signs. And because they learned together, the next storm would meet a community that was finally ready to listen.